What's up, heathens? How ya doing? I'm the Godless engineer, and I critically analyze apologist claims to give you the best arguments and information so that you can stand up and use your voice. Today, we're going to be taking a look at Pastor Daniel from Cheney Baptist Church, and he's going to be telling us why atheism requires faith. As you all know, I think that this is a horrible idea, mainly because it's not true. Atheism literally requires no faith whatsoever. Atheism, for the most part, is just not being convinced by the horrible evidence that has been given to us that a God does exist. We simply do not believe that a God does exist. But I would suspect that most atheists out there would not say that God definitely doesn't exist as a general deity. As a specific deity, like the Christian God, I'm sure most people, most atheists would say that God definitely doesn't exist. But that's also not a faith-based position. That is an evidentially supported position. So, at no point does atheism require faith. But Pastor Daniel is going to be telling us today why it does require faith. So if you're interested in that bullshit, then please stay tuned.
Today I want to talk to you guys about the relationship between atheism and faith, and in a previous video I kind of talked about this a little bit, claiming that atheism actually requires faith, but in the comment section of that video I got hundreds and hundreds of negative comments claiming I was so ignorant of the subject, and by the way I have multiple master's degrees in theology which deals with the subject of theism and atheism, things like that, so I'm not ignorant, I'm very educated. But anyways, they would claim that it's just so terrible for me to even suggest that atheism requires faith.
Well, for one thing, starting out your video by using some kind of argument from authority is not going to bode well for you at all. I really don't care how many masters you have in this subject area. I don't care if you even have a doctorate of theology in it. You're still completely wrong about atheism requiring faith. Before we progress forward with Pastor Daniel's video, I feel like we need to define what faith is exactly. Now, there's a couple definitions for faith. The first one is just complete confidence or trust that something is true. The second definition of faith is centered more around this particular discussion. It's a strong belief in God or in the doctrines of a religion based on spiritual apprehension rather than proof. This is what most people would call blind faith. There are plenty of apologists out there that make the case that they have evidentially supported faith, meaning that they have evidence that informs their faith and they have complete trust and confidence in their conclusion because of this evidence. I kind of feel like that's the antithesis of what faith in this particular context means, but the kind of faith that we're talking about today would be the faith without proof.
So this kind of begs two different questions. First off, why did they claim that atheism doesn't require faith? And secondly, why did I claim that atheism does require faith?
Okay, well, I can go ahead and answer that first question for you. The reason why I don't consider atheism to require faith is because I'm not making a positive claim about anything. I'm just saying that I'm not convinced that a God does exist. Why would that require faith? I'm not saying I have complete trust and confidence in something. I'm also not saying anything that I would require proof for. I'm just saying I don't believe in a deity in general. That's it. No positive claim or anything like that. Now, I can go into the reasons why I'm not convinced by your claim that a God does exist. I can definitely give you evidence, which makes it evidentially supported, which means that it doesn't require faith if I have evidence. So I am quite interested in why you claim that atheism does require faith.
So I don't really want to misrepresent them, so I'll kind of give you a little bit of a glimpse into what I was saying or how our conversations went. And basically, as I conversed with them in the comment section, I would say things like, atheism is the belief that God doesn't exist, right? Faith requires belief. So by claiming atheism is the belief, I was claiming atheism is the faith that God doesn't exist.
Well, no, that's kind of a real fucky way to argue around that particular statement there. For one thing, that's not what atheists claim. Atheists don't claim that there is no God. For the most part, most atheists would claim that they don't believe that a God exists. And not all beliefs require faith. Like, faith in the context of just having complete trust and confidence in something is not what the term means when we're talking about religious matters. When we're talking in a religious context, faith means that you believe something to be true and have that same kind of trust and confidence, but you don't have proof for it. Like, you don't have hard empirical evidence for it. You just believe it because you're moved spiritually to believe it, or, you think that it's some kind of good thing to believe something without any kind of proof. Typically, when we're talking in a religious context, that's the type of faith that we're talking about. The way that he's defined atheism here and the way that he contextualizes what beliefs are just completely wrong.
But they say, no, that's not true. Atheism is not the belief, it's the absence of the belief. So it's not that they believe God doesn't exist, it's that they don't believe God exists.
Yeah, I'm glad that you got that right. Yeah, we're starting to get back onto a good track. Way to go, Pastor Daniel.
So they're basically taking the word believe out of the equation by saying they don't believe. They're saying they don't have faith that God exists, things like that. So with that in mind, it makes a lot of sense until you realize that they're just rephrasing the statement to mean the exact same thing, and theists could do the same thing, right? Because a theist could say, it's not that I believe that God exists, it's that I don't believe that God doesn't exist, right? You can rephrase the statement and communicate the exact same thing.
Well, that sentence right there is a double negative, which is a violation of basic grammar. Compared to the other sentence that you have represented with atheism here, it is not a double negative. So no, these two sentences are not the same. I mean, theism is the belief that God does exist. The antithesis of that is the non-belief, or the fact that you don't believe that a God exists. That would be the antithesis of theism.
And that's exactly what they were doing. So why do I believe that atheists do have faith? Well, what is required for faith? There's possibilities. You have to have possibilities. If there's no other possibility, then it doesn't take faith to believe something. But if there is multiple possibilities, then it does require faith.
No, God! No, God, please, no! 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 No!
I'm going to have to call bullshit on this. Because even if you have multiple possibilities, you could still not have complete trust and confidence in whatever possibility you've chosen. So therefore, you do not have faith in one particular possibility over another. But also, this totally deviates from what it even means to have faith. I'm totally confused as to why you would connect the existence of possibilities to faith. Because either definition of faith that we want to work with here just doesn't exactly map to the whole existence of possibilities thing. In the context of religion and a religious type of faith, it is believing in one thing without any proof. So let's say you do have multiple possibilities for this one particular answer to a question, whether or not you believe a God exists. If you have an answer for that, and you have this complete trust and confidence in it, and you don't have any kind of proof for that answer, you just believe that's the answer, that would be faith. If you have proof for the conclusion that you come to, then that means that you're not using faith. You do not have faith in that particular answer. Now, as far as how this maps to atheism and the entire context of this video, I would say that atheists don't have complete and absolute confidence and trust in the answer of God doesn't exist. Mainly because we're not saying that. We're not saying definitely that God doesn't exist in some kind of deistic fashion. I would say that I take the hard atheist or Gnostic atheist route in saying that your particular version of God doesn't exist, and I can evidentially support that conclusion, which means that I am not using faith. So I feel like you're convoluting the conversation. You're trying to confuse us with connecting possibilities to the idea of faith. And just because a possibility exists, that means that you have to use faith in order to follow that possibility to its conclusion. You just simply don't.
So the reason why theism requires faith is because theists say God exists, right? That's a possibility. But there's also a possibility that God doesn't exist. Of course, a theist doesn't believe that God doesn't exist, but they do believe that God does exist, but they understand that there's still the possibility that maybe God doesn't exist. So when a theist says God does exist, they hold to that by faith simply because there's a possibility that he doesn't exist.
Well, no. In this particular context, for the use of the word faith, you're not talking about they're holding to this answer because there's this other possible answer. They're holding to that answer without any proof, or they have confidence and trust in this answer without any proof. That would be an instance of faith. I feel like you just have this very messed up sense of what faith even means. All in all, you just seem to be totally misrepresenting why Christians have faith in their God. Like I said before, some Christians may feel like they have evidence to support their faith in God or their complete trust and confidence. But then there's other Christians out there that don't have this same kind of evidential proof, or they don't feel like they even need this kind of proof to have faith in God. That would be the blind faith type of faith. You're just totally misrepresenting the context surrounding this conversation.
But it goes both ways, ladies and gents. For an atheist to claim that there is no God, which again, if you say you believe there is no God or you don't believe that there is a God, you're still holding to the possibility that there is no God, but you hold to that possibility by faith simply because there is another possibility. So if there was no other possibility, that wouldn't require faith. So if theism requires faith, then so does atheism, because they're on opposite sides of the possibilities, and both are possibilities, right? God may exist, God may not exist. Of course, theists believe that he does. Atheists don't believe that he does, right? If you want to phrase it that way.
Wow. Well, I mean, I do want to phrase it that way because that would be accurate to how I view this conversation, is that I don't believe that a God exists, but that's not the same as saying that I believe God doesn't exist. It's not a positive claim. Also, just because there are people in this world that believe in a God does not mean that I have to not believe in that God based purely on faith. Again, you're totally confusing what the word faith means. Faith isn't something that you have just because there's a multitude of different possibilities. Faith describes your relationship with your conclusion, with it either being complete trust and confidence in your conclusion for whatever reason you might have, or it's the blind faith type of definition. It's where you have this complete trust and confidence without having any kind of evidence behind it, or without having really any reason to believe in it. You just do. This whole possibilities thing just totally ignores what the word faith even means.
But both communicate the same thing. One holds to the possibility that he exists, one holds to the possibility that he doesn't exist. Both hold to those possibilities by faith simply because there's another possibility. But what about agnostics? Because I think there's a lot of confusion in the comments section because of this. Agnostic would be the person who says, I don't know. Right? He looks at the possibility that God doesn't exist, and he looks at the possibility that God does exist, and he says, I don't know which one it is. So they don't believe either one.
Well, you're describing God doesn't exist as being the position that most atheists hold, when in fact most atheists would probably land in the column of agnostic atheist, meaning that I don't believe a God exists, but I also don't know whether or not a God exists. I would consider myself in that particular column. You're trying to separate agnostic as a single term that's in competition with atheism and theism when it's really not. Agnosticism and Gnosticism deal with what you know. What do you know to be true? Most Christians out there would probably land in the Gnostic or hard theist type of column, while atheists mostly would probably end up in the agnostic atheist column or the soft atheist column. And it's not that we don't hold to any possibility, it's just that we don't know what the absolute answer is, and so we're not going to venture a guess as to whether or not this ambiguous deity figure exists. But unless you wholly believe in a supernatural deity, kind of seems like you're an atheist, because you don't seem to believe in that particular claim.
So they're not holding to anything, either possibility. They're just saying, I don't know. So a theist has faith, an atheist has faith, an agnostic would not have faith in that particular situation. Faith is not an insult. I just said theists have faith, so why would atheists having faith be insulting?
Why would that be insulting? Because we have reasons and we have evidence for coming to the conclusion that we do not believe in a God, or we're not convinced that a God exists. That's why we would be upset saying that we have faith in it when we don't. We do have, well, faith in the context of religion and religious ideas, not faith in the idea of having complete trust and confidence in something. But even on the complete trust and confidence, as far as an ambiguous deity figure, I would not have complete trust and confidence that one doesn't exist. I don't know if that one exists, but I don't believe that that one exists. What I do have is complete trust and confidence in that your particular definition definitely does not exist, and that's based on evidence. It's based on the evidence that your Bible describes your God wholly, and he does not comport with reality. There's nothing in the Bible about God, describing God, that suggests that God is actually real. Yahweh is actually real, but still not faith.
So obviously it's not meant to be an insult, but it is supposed to be more educational into letting people know why atheism requires faith and things like that. So hopefully that makes sense.
It really fucking did. I still don't understand why you think that atheists have faith, other than the fact that you've come up with this contrived definition for faith that just means that there are multiple possibilities, so you inherently have faith when you choose one of the possibilities. In your own example here, you gave the possibility of just not knowing whether or not a God exists. That third option, the agnostics, and you said they have no faith. Well, by your own definition, being that it's another possibility, just we can't know or won't know, or we can never know whether or not a God exists, that also is another possibility. So you, as an agnostic, would also have faith based on the really fucked up definition that you have for faith. Now, I know some of you in the comments might be screaming about a dictionary fallacy because I referred to a dictionary in order to get my definition of a faith. Now, I'm not saying that dictionaries are prescriptive in any kind of way, but they do try to get how words are being used. So in comparing the dictionary definition of what faith is to my experiences with how people use faith in the conversation of whether or not God exists, I came to the conclusion that faith is having complete trust and confidence in God without any proof. So I just wanted to clear that up, that I was specifically separating out the two types of religious faith that do exist, but it seems like what he was really getting at in this video was the belief without proof, the blind faith kind of definition, and not just having complete trust and confidence in the idea that God exists. Well, I'd really love to hear y'all's opinions about his explanation for why atheists have faith. If you will, please go down below, let me know what you think in the comments. And hey, while you're down there, why don't you smash that like button and subscribe if you like this kind of content. Don't forget to stand up and use your voice. Bye, heathens!